Hey guys, this is DFD, aka Dark Frozen Deaths, back with another Kamihime project video. Now, this one, some things have changed in game, so you will have to pay attention to a few different things outside of the event because it's like permanent stuff now. But the event itself, it is an advent event. It is the Yamata no Orochi event. Makes me wonder if there's anything related to Susanna O and her scenes. But the deal with this event is the fact that it's an advent event and you can get some free stuff from it. However, big, very important change that I need to point out. There is now a time limit on all content, every single bit of it. If it's a raid, it's still going to have that same 60-minute time limit. If it is solo content like the advents or even the Fang Caves, it is now 90 minutes. So if you do not come back to it and finish it off in 90 minutes, you're going to lose that run. That means if you're doing something like, say, Accessory Quest or Ragnarok Plus in the Advent event, or anything that has limited runs, you need to make sure you can do your runs. If you do not come back in 90 minutes, you're going to lose that run for the day. So, all the more important to be able to finish off your stuff. This is especially true for heroic fights if you're trying to do any of that stuff, because it's like a 90-minute time limit on all heroic fights now, which also includes the one they're going to add later on for heroic records. So even if there isn't a fail trigger, even if there's stuff where it's like, okay, you can just face tank it for all eternity, you now have 90 minutes to clear your stuff. I don't know if it goes in the tower as well. I haven't really paid attention if it did on the Japanese side, but just make sure that you can clear 90 minutes. Second thing I need to point out too, it seems at this point we're going to get a lot of event weapons that start with large for one skill and medium for the second. Skill wise, these are better than the ultimate weapons, the ultimate raid weapons. So be absolutely sure to get these weapons if you're replacing any of that type of stuff. For example, there's plenty of events, including this one, which start with a large defender. It's going to give you a bit more of a boost compared to the ultimate raid, so it gives them a little bit more utility. I would say hold on to them just in case. You never know, so that's something to really look forward to now. And the last thing I need to point out, I'll go over their abilities at the end of this video, but the two new Kamihime that showed up, they're limited. They're both pretty good. One's better than the other though. So you probably want to go get them. Just saying that right now. They will come back later, but you probably want to get them. And speaking of the gacha, there's now gachas that have step-ups where it starts off with like 50 star coins and then you pay a little bit more and you can sometimes do laps. They are very good gachas outside of the guaranteed ones, in my opinion. A 15% SSR rate is insane for this one, so anybody that's planning on spending on the game because it is not free, you're going to want to try and do those. If you're planning on doing anything outside of SSR guaranteed gachas, that's probably going to be it. But anyways, on with this event, it is water-based, like I said, Advent, so no help. And there is no heroic for Advents, that stopped a long time ago. But you do want to pay attention to what the boss does, because it's a little bit interesting. Now, as for the stuff that you can get from this, I can easily say that every last bit of the SSR stuff may or may not have some worth, depending on where you're at or what you're trying to do. So it may be worth keeping all of them. I took a glance at what they do. I even had to actually go do the event a little bit in order to know what the boss does specifically, because this translation isn't all that great on this wiki. So the SSR stuff is worth it a little bit. I can say that you're probably going to need to stock up on some stuff too, because it's going to be a lot of things later on you'll need it for. The cores or something you might need to stock up on. You may need to stock up on the skill points too, because a lot of weapons are starting to take those, the skill EXP. Might need to stock up on the soul points even, because S-class souls are going to have one huge change later on, because The old ones that we have in the game right now are going to get special skills that take 100 mastery points. That is 10,000 soul points per skill. And a lot of them are very worth it. Then on top of that, there's new souls later down the line too. You may need to stock up on the soul points, so keep an eye out for those. Magic jewels, self-explanatory. You might even throw them at this unlimited gacha that's going on right now. So you probably want to go through and get practically as much stuff as you can from this, because there's a lot of stuff that's starting to be like different types of sinks. Like they might be a skill point sink, like skill EXP sink, or they might be a weapon EXP sink, or Adolan EXP sinks already here with the final break Adolans. You never know. Might need the Orochi, might need the soul points now. You never know. So you may need to stock up on all that. I'd even go so far as to say that for anybody that's trying to grind out ranks, you do need to stock up on the half elixirs, because the new ranks need tens of thousands of AP just to get up one rank. If you're trying that hard for the magic jewels that you can get from getting every 10 ranks, you're going to need a lot of half elixirs. Trust me on that. Energy seeds too, technically, because they'll still give you experience, so you may actually need everything. But priority is always the SSR stuff, the magic jewels, the stuff you can pull, like the tickets. That's always been priority. The Orochi and the soul points might have priority now too, depending on what you're doing. So there's a lot of stuff. Excuse me. Now, for the difficulties, you do have to be rank 100 in order to do Ragnarok Plus. That's kind of like the general restriction for a lot of the earlier grindy stuff, so just make sure of that. If you don't care about getting like maximum rank or anything like that, you do want to shoot for rank 140 at some point, because that's the highest point you need for any sort of content so far on JP side. So rank 140 should cover all that stuff anyways, but rank 100 is where a lot of the big stuff starts, like S-Class Souls, you can enter Ragnarok Plus, so on. As for the enemies, even on the lowest difficulty, this boss has weird mechanics that you have to really pay attention to. First off, no rage bar. No orb bar either, so it doesn't have a burst or overdrive or whatever you want to call it. What it does is put cumulative buffs on itself that dictate what trigger goes off. And I have to go through them in order. So that's, in a way, that's effectively its orb gauge. So if you have characters that like eating orbs, they're useless. If you have characters that want to sip and drain a rage bar, that doesn't work. You can't use any of that stuff. Now, to deal with this enemy's attacks, like I can even sip and say it here because it's pretty much the same regardless of difficulty. The first attack, from what I've seen in game, defense down on 2 characters, randomly. And it lasts for quite a while. It's basically 5 turns regardless of difficulty. This also puts the cumulative buff count to 2. Now, when the cumulative buff count is at 2, it will nuke you 2 random times. Nothing else. And that puts it at 4. When it's stacked 4 buffs, 2 random times, and your burst gauge gets drained a little bit for whoever gets smacked. So even if you defend against the damage, you're going to see burst gauges go down. Pay attention to that if you're trying to full burst. That attack sets it to 6. The next one sets it to 8, while also doing 2 random hits that put drown on people. The turn count seems to be the same, which is 4 turns, but the potency of the drown depends on the difficulty. Ragnarok Plus is like 1,000 per tick, so you'll lose up to 4,000 HP on 2 random characters. Nothing too serious at that point in the game, but still may want to pay attention. The last move. When the full count is at 8, it resets the count to 0, but does AoE damage to everyone. And it stacks a damage increase buff to itself. It is permanent, and it can keep going. But it is hinted that you can use buff removal for it, so be wary of the fight taking too long. Generally, with the turn cycles, it will take about 5 turns for each stack, so if you have your buff removal, you can pretty much deal with that with 1 character. if that ever gives you any trouble. So that's the thing I had to break down with it. You do want to be careful with the defense down on your characters though, because that just makes them get nuked even harder. So there you go. But I don't need to go over the HP values too much. They're more or less the same regardless of the different advents we had before. So you're generally more or less like doubling the HP counts between the difficulties. The only difference is when you go from standard to expert. But you shouldn't be grinding standard at all. And at this stage of the game, neither should you be grinding expert. Just clear them to get your free stuff. But ultimate, it's almost 3 times the HP of expert actually. And then Ragnarok's like double that HP. Ragnarok Plus, I have to go over a little bit more because these enemies are like accessory quest level. They're like have different triggers and all that. But first enemy, 4 orbs, poisons everybody when the charge count is 3. So 3 orbs. But it only does it once. It is a permanent poison, so be careful of that. You have to remove it. But it will take 800 every turn. This is the first time we have met a debuff that sticks on you the whole fight. Like a damage over time debuff that sticks on you the whole entire fight, so be careful of that. But it also deals extra damage to people that are poisoned with its burst, so be careful of that one too. The second enemy. It puts attack down on anybody when you do a burst. So that's something to know. It also randomly hits you 2 times and drains your burst gauge, so again, be careful of that. Third fight, well, I should say third stage, the whole thing's an entire fight. When its HP hits half, 35%, or 20%, it is going to stack attack up buffs on itself. And it does single target damage whenever it does its burst. The problem is it has 1 orb count. And the funny thing is too, as the stage progresses, you notice the orb counts go down. Like the first enemy had 4, the second enemy had 2, this one has 1. And the next enemy doesn't have any, it just runs off of the thing I mentioned earlier. But for its for the boss in her Ragnarok Plus version, 12 million HP. Again, first turn, defense down 2 random people. Second turn it takes, it's going to do 2 random hits. Third turn it takes, it does the 2 random hits and removes 20 burst gauge from everybody. The next turn it's going to do 2 random hits and then put drown 1000 HP 4 turns. And then the next one after that is just going to be AoE nuking. Period. And then it resets back to 0 and does the cycle all over again. If you double check the buff count, you'll know what you're up against. So that's something to do. Just click on the enemy, see their buff list, you can do that. Now, as for the stuff you can get, again, I would say all 3 of them are worth it depending on what you're trying to do. Just be careful with the third one, and I'll go over why. But starting off, this Adolan, 40% elemental attack to everybody, increases combo rate. So it seems like it's not just a double attack or a triple attack increase, it's both at once. And on top of that, when you summon her, normal attack damage goes up on everybody. For that reason and that reason alone, you may or may not want to keep her. Because a normal attack damage buff is going to help you out later down the line. If you're trying to deal the quote-unquote meta damage, it's going to be through normal attacks. Burst can still do quite a lot itself. Ability damage, depending on how you set it up, can still do a lot. But normal attacks is still the most potential. And I say potential because you still have to put a lot of investment into it. More than what the game gives you for free. So that's something to know. But more normal attack damage is never a bad thing. So this buff will help you out with that. If she's in main slot, that will help you out with that. Something to hold on to, my opinion. This weapon, large attack, like large assault, medium defender. So if you're using a large assault weapon from the water ultimate raid, this can replace one of them. Keep that in mind. Not to mention, if a soul uses it, they'll buff their combo rate, meaning they can get their burst back a little bit faster. So, there you go. Now, the spear. You're probably not going to use this for too long, unless you really want to try and do something specific. But what it does is the rebellion thing. Rebellion is like vigor, but in reverse. When your HP gets low, it starts getting stronger. And it works well with pride. If I remember correctly, water does indeed have a pride weapon. But the issue with that is that it's dangerous to fight at low HP, and water is pretty good at getting their HP back. So you really have to pay attention to what you're doing if you're trying to use any sort of low HP strategies. It's not impossible, but it's not something I really recommend. If you want to do it, this weapon's here. There you go. Now, for the event missions, of course, same stuff. Clear with certain rarities, you get some stuff. Just clear with a team that's full of R rarity Kamihime, and you can do all of these easily. But you can still do the Expert and Ultimate with SR Kamihime. I'd still go with R just so you don't have to keep changing your team. Excuse me. As for the other one, it's clearing Ragnarok Plus without using an elixir. If you're strong enough, easily done. But like I said, a lot of the stuff that's on this list you may want to keep and hold on to because we're starting to need a crap ton of items. Even if you don't plan on keeping that spear I mentioned, or even a sword, still get them. You can turn them into different fodder. You can possibly try to get some weapon shards from them if you want. You can get more skill experience points. You can get more weapon experience, but it ain't that much. You can always fodder the stuff that you don't keep. So that said, in my opinion, it's always worth to get the SSR stuff, but it may not be worth to keep them. If you don't plan on keeping them, they become fodder. Most likely, if you're not keeping it, it's going to be the spear. The sword will at least have some use, depending on what you have. And the Eidolon probably should stick in your sub slots anyway, unless you just have a crap ton of gacha Eidolons or something. Who knows? But like I said, try to get everything. We're starting to need so many more stuff like the books. We're starting to need more of the green orbs. We're starting to need more skill experience. We're starting to need more soul points later on the line too. The Orichalcum, the Dragonic Eye Shards. You may just want to clear out as much as you can. Period, point blank. Now then, as for the characters, well, it doesn't say that they're unlimited, but it doesn't say that they're limited on this list, but you do still want to pull these guys if you can. But Thunder Nephthys, she gives you burst attack resistance down. I use this on Light Uriel. It is very powerful. The resistance down debuffs are way stronger than the normal defense ones. That's because they tend to do more stuff than what's labeled. The elemental resistance will also reduce the enemy's resistance towards getting debuffed. Burst and attack resistance, they will go past the 50%, up to 70% total. So if you have 40% defense down, this makes it a full 70. So that's something to know. So that said, for like 4 turns, like 4 out of the 8 turns, enemies will take increased burst damage because of this debuff. If that wasn't enough, she also has a passive where she increases the burst soft cap for the entire party. It's only a small amount, like I think only 5%, but it still helps. It still helps. And the unique thing she has for herself is when she does a circle dance, it changes what gets increased. So the first time, she gets lightning elemental attack, and it's supposed to be for 2 turns. I looked ahead for that. The second time, she increases her stinger probability, so she gets a stinger buff. That's also for 2 turns. The third time she uses this skill, her burst performance is greatly improved. This is what probably makes her do the 4 million bursts. but the thing is, you can only use it once per turn. Now, as for the other thing that she has, she can up her own combo rate, she can increase her own burst gauge. And then on top of that too is the fact that when she bursts, it comes back faster. So that's something to know. Now, she's really good in my opinion, and you definitely want a burst res or an attack res character for every single element you can get your hands on. She's permanent though, so if you can't get her, unfortunately, well, she's still going to be there later. But part of the reason why she's also valued too is because of her weapon right here, because it gives large exceed, and then it gives you barrage and defender, which is small. So that's something to know. As for the other character that's going to be in this gacha, we have the SSR version of Argos on fire. And she's also pretty good, but in a different way. What this is where she deals, and it's roughly every 3 turns, triple fire damage to a single enemy. What it basically is that it just gives you a single hit that's like 3 times multiplier. And then on top of that too, other stuff that she does that's pretty interesting is the fact that she can hit a fire enemy multiple times. The number of flame marks that she has increases the amount of time she hits with this. So it can get pretty large. But the biggest kicker is that she's introducing a damage plus buff. Ability damage plus in her case. And that increases the damage per hit based on the number of flame marks she has on herself. So, assuming you have roughly like 8 flame marks, because if I remember correctly, that's the most it stacks to. This starts going to everybody on the team. So, I do believe the flame marks that stacks on her, they do last, yeah, it says up to 10. So what this means is that you'll increase everybody's ability damage to 100,000 extra damage per hit. What that means is that if she's doing this this multi-hit, where it's up to 9 times hits, she's getting an extra 900,000 damage. That's what the damage plus does for that. However, her first nuke is going to get an extra 100,000, nothing else, because it is a single target hit. So that said, it does help you out. But the interesting thing about her is her second assist ability. She cannot combo at all. But she does her first skill every single time during a normal attack. This is very good for elaborate combinations because of the fact that she does a damage nuke every turn. No questions asked. The fact that she cannot combo attack can still be offset by putting her in the back and then getting somebody else, like say Fire Amon, to fill up burst gauge or something like that. So that said, and she does burst, she's just going to use her first skill again. But that said, she's very good for ability comps. If you're really trying to set up one for Fire, Fire does have quite a few ability nukers that would really benefit from her. So there's that. But the whole concept for her is an elaborate comp. And as far as I can tell, she's literally the only Kamihime that has no significant catch. Like, needs a certain amount of HP or needs certain buffs on her. She will just nuke every single turn. No questions asked. She can't combo, but she'll nuke every single turn. I don't think there's a single other Kamihime that can do that regardless of HP or regardless of buffs. So, that's something to know. So you just get a free extra damage nuke every single turn. If you've been boosting up Elaborate and all that, this should nuke for pretty hard because you can get like another 50% from weapons, and you can get like another 100% from buffs on top of her damage plus. So, depends on how creative you are with her. And the weapon itself that she has, ironically, is a critical weapon. So you may actually want this. Critical is a new type of thing in the game where it is a damage spike at a random chance, regardless of whatever you're fighting. It sounds like Stinger on paper, but it's not. It's a different multiplier than Stinger. If it goes off, it is 50% to critical multiplier, period. It does not go past this. It does not go higher no matter how many critical weapons you have. But getting multiple critical weapons ups the chances of it happening. So if you do have enough of this, you can get a guaranteed critical hit for an extra 50% more damage. Period, point blank. Of course, that is outside of multipliers. Like, outside of the soft caps, I mean. So, remember this. This is the first time we have this critical weapon in the game. At least to my knowledge. So, that said, you may want to get this too. That critical can trigger with anything. Abilities, bursts, normal attacks. I've seen some insane damage because of multiplier abuse with weapons that do critical. It is insane. This might actually be worth getting. It doesn't go to large, unfortunately, but it still should be worth getting just because of the critical multiplier. You may actually want to have one of these weapons on your grid, especially if you can final break it. And then, like I said, Argos herself, very, very good for ability damage. She does it every turn, guaranteed. So, there you go. And one thing I thought that held back ability damage characters is the fact that they have to deal with cooldowns. She's got a low cooldown on one of her skills. And her passive just activates it without even affecting the cooldown. So, there you go. And on top of that, she even spends most of her time with a damage increase based on how many flame marks she puts on an enemy. So, that's the thing. And whenever she uses a damage ability, she gets a flame mark. So it's just going to keep increasing throughout the fight. So if you ask me, Argos is worth the ability damage setups for Fire, and Nephthys is worth the burst damage setups for Thunder. They're both very good in my opinion, depending on how you use them. And ironically, both of them like axes too, so if you're working on Lucent, there you go. But anyways, that's all for this. More of this is going to come soon because there are some other updates I probably want to go over as well. And we may not be too far off from that type of stuff. But again, grind out as much as you can. There is a 90-minute time limit on everything, if not the 60 from raids. Everything is a time limit now. Like Union events, they had a time limit, of course, because you only had like 12 hours now, because it's not 24. But you had 12 hours to do as many raids as you can for it. Everything has a time limit now. Even solo content. So don't let that time limit go to waste. If you know you're not going to be able to finish in 90 minutes, like say you go somewhere or your internet gets cut off, then you may want to try to deal with it a certain way. Like however you can get the content cleared. So keep that in mind. But anyways, that's all for this. More of this will come soon. Kind of a long video, but I had to go over some new stuff, unfortunately. And also, when I get the chance, I'm going to do a sneak peek on the new souls that just got introduced. These 5 souls are incredible. They are absurd. It breaks the game. They're that good. But anyways, that's still going to be content that shows up later down the line, because this is Japanese side we're talking about when I talk about the new souls. That's the unfortunate thing about that. But anyways, that's all for this. More of this will come soon, and take care.